Hey friends, thank you very much for stopping by. When I showed this card on Instagram, I was asked how I created it, and therefore I wanted to make a short tutorial. But since I included the assembly of the bee, the coloring, and the mechanism, it turned out pretty long. But I put timestamps in the description so you can jump to the parts that you're interested in. So let's get started. First I want to show you the supplies I've used to build the mechanism. This is the waving pull tab starter set by Lawn Fawn. And you also need either So Much Fun or Special Delivery. Both sets contain a slot piece that you need and either arms, bear arms, or bird wings. I have here 2 examples of how they work or how they're intended to work. And I altered it a bit to make it work for my bee. So I chose to use the So Much Fun set, but it doesn't matter, you can also work with the Special Delivery set. The next thing that we need for our card is the pop-up bee by Lawn Fawn. It contains that main piece that I cut from white cardstock that is suitable for Copic coloring, and this solid body piece that I cut from the same cardstock. I didn't need this open body piece, and the wings, so this detail piece I cut from pixie dust cardstock, and the solid piece I cut twice from acetate. And here are my pieces. So I cut out the main piece from white cardstock, and we need to keep these tiny cutouts because we want to inlay them later. This solid body piece. And for this detailed part of the wings, I chose to cut them from colored cardstock instead of glitter cardstock because it will make it easier to see. The solid wing was cut twice from acetate. And I cut the bear arms from acetate. And to make it easier to see for you what I'm doing with them, I also cut them from colored cardstock, just a random color. And the last thing is a card panel. I chose to use the largest of the small stitch rectangles, but you can have a shorter or longer panel. With this example, it's flush with the card base. It must be long enough for the mechanism, but otherwise you are completely free to choose. And then we need this stabilizer piece. I prefer to have 2 of them, what I'll explain later. And then we need the tab. I recommend to cut it from whatever color cardstock you want, and additionally from heavyweight cardstock. And then glue those back to back together to give them more stability. Because this tab must be stable so that it doesn't bend when we play with our mechanism. So let's build our bee body. So I have the 2 main pieces and these 2 solid body pieces cut from white cardstock. And here are the tiny pieces that we want to inlay later. We can cut off the legs since we don't need them. But if you prefer to keep the legs, you can definitely do that. And then you just cut this base piece off at the feet of the bee. And then we can use the slits that are provided by the die to assemble the bee. But there is a difference in the orientation. So you can see at the head there's a smaller and a bigger piece. And depending on which orientation you choose, you can see the smaller part or just the bigger part. And I chose to just have the bigger part. And depending on what part you want to be on top, decides where you place that solid body piece behind. So I apply glue to that solid body piece all over, so that I can inlay these small cutout pieces. So making sure I'm placing it on the right side, so the side without antenna. And then I puzzle those small pieces back into place. And here's how that looks. So we have a flat surface on top. And then I will do the same thing for the other side. And to not bore you to death, I will skip that part. So here are my two pieces. I will apply glue to both the open sides of the two pieces. I hope you can see that. And then place them together. And this is our bee body. So to color the bee to look like a bumblebee, I used these grays. My N5 ran out of ink, so I used C5 instead. And the N9 is just for some dots later. And these are the yellows I used. So I started with my lightest gray marker, the N1, and traced the die cut lines, because I used those to determine the position of the stripes of my bee. So I followed those lines, and that will create the pattern of the bee. Then I started by coloring in the black stripes, having the darkest marker, the N7, on the outside and feathering that in, then blending it with my next color, the C5, and then the N3, which will be the lightest marker for the stripes. And by having the lightest marker in the center and the darkest marker on the outsides, it will give the illusion of a round object. And I will continue that for all of the stripes. Then I colored in the head, imagining that there is a shadow at the neck. So I used the darkest marker at the bottom and also on the outsides, again, to give the illusion of a round object. For the head, I also incorporated the N1 marker to give some highlights there. And after I colored in the bee, I went over all parts again, using the same colors and the same order, just to enhance the color and for a better blend. And this is how the bee looks so far. Next, I'll use the yellow markers, doing the same thing, meaning I start with the darkest shade on the outside, then using the medium shade, and then the lightest marker for the center. And after I colored in all yellow stripes, I repeated the process, using the same colors in the same order to give it a bit more saturation. Next, I will add some dot details to make it look like a fluffy bumblebee instead of a bee. And I'm starting with the N9 marker, so the darkest. And I'm putting dots on the outside of the bee, next to the black lines, and also inside of them. Then I switched to my N7 marker and put dots to the places where I used the C5 marker before. And then I used the C5 marker to put dots in the center, so the lightest part of the bee. And then I finally used the N3 marker to put dots all around the black stripes to soften the transition from black to yellow. And this is how our bumblebee looks so far. And then I did the same thing to add some dot details to the head. I added final touches with these gel pens. I have this clear star, a metallic gold, and a 08 and a 05 white gel pen. And I started with the 08 white gel pen, then the one with the smaller tip, the 05 white gel pen, then the metallic gold gel pen, and finally the clear glitter pen. And that's our final bumblebee. So let's get started with the mechanism. We need a notch die and a template from the waving pull tab starter set and this slot piece from the So Much Fun set. And we also need our front panel. And we will align the notch piece at the top of our card panel. And we have to make sure that this metal bar is above the cardstock. So it's not laying on the cardstock, it's above. Otherwise, the notch will be too low. So we have to make sure we align it above. And the notch doesn't need to be centered. So in my card, I chose to have my object in the center. But you can shift this to the left or right, wherever you want to place your object. And then I will attach the notch die with some low-tack tape, making sure it's above the cardstock. Then I'll take the template, align it with the die, with the round opening, and then I place the slot piece with the slots going vertically in the rectangular opening of the template and securing it with a piece of low-tack tape. Then I can remove the template and run it through my die cutting machine. Then I can remove the tape. So and here are the pieces that we need to assemble our waving pull tab mechanism. We also need a small brad for the mechanism. So and now I'll demonstrate you how you usually assemble the waving pull tab. So you feed the brad from the back through the tab and then through the arms. And you have to make sure that the X that is indented by the die, that this is pointing towards the top. And the wings also have this X, as you can see on the die, which marks the top of the wing. So you feed the brad through the tab, then through the arms, and it doesn't matter if you put the left first or the right first, just making sure the X is on top, and then you can close the brad. After that, you can feed the arms or wings respectively through the two slots. And then when you pull the tab, the arms will wave. But for the bee, I had to do this a little differently. And I will show you that now. So to make the mechanism work with my bee wings, I had to go backwards. So I fed the bread through both arms, still making the axis on top, and last through the tab. Then I feed the arms through the slots and align everything to have it straight. And then I place my bee between the two wings or arms. And temporarily adhere it with some low-tack tape. So after I made sure that my bee is centered and straight, I put some tape runner on the back of my wing and attach it to the arm temporarily. You can choose if you want to have the wing further in or further out, whatever you fancy. But after you place them, you need to pull the tab to check if the wings still look good in the down position. In my case, I needed to shift them a little bit further in. And then I fiddle around with it until I'm happy with how it looks. So now I can remove the bee and deassemble the mechanism. So I opened the bread, removed the tab piece, and then carefully removed both arms. So then I can check if both sides are equal by laying them back to back, and then I can adjust them if needed. And then I have to remove the pink parts that are showing through. When you're using cardstock, you can use a pencil to draw, to trace the lines and then cut them. But since this is difficult with acetate, I chose to just cut through the open parts of that wing until no more of the pink cardstock is visible. So, and that's the result. From the back, you can see how I cut down that pink piece to fit behind the wing. Then I removed the wing from the arm. It was just attached using tape runner, and now I can use liquid glue that is much stronger than the tape runner. And then I can adhere the solid wing piece that I cut from acetate, and I will sandwich the arm between that detailed wing part and the acetate. So our first wing is completed, and we will repeat these steps for the second wing. But this time I decided to use the acetate arm instead of the pink cardstock arm. And I can find the right position for my acetate bear arm by placing the two detailed wing parts on top of each other, back to back. And then I can place my acetate arm in the correct position and cut it down. So that's the result. The arm is attached to the detailed piece, and now I need to attach the solid acetate piece. So both wings are finished, one with a pink arm and one with an acetate arm, and I can use these to build my mechanism. So I'm feeding the first wing from the top to the back and feed my bread through it backwards. Then I feed the second arm through and place it on the bread. You can see the head of the bread is facing the paper and the legs are sticking up. So now my last piece is the tab that I also feed through the bread and then close its prongs. And now we can test our wings if they can move freely, and this works perfectly fine. but you can see that this is very wobbly and not stable. So this is why we need these stabilizer pieces. So the die creates 2 score lines, and we need to fold along these score lines. Now we have to apply adhesive to this middle part. I'm using double-sided tape because this is recommended, but honestly I usually use liquid glue because I can wiggle it a bit. But to prevent to make a mess, it might be better to use double-sided tape. And I'm placing it adhesive down and wrap it around the tab piece against these 2 noses. And then I will make sure that my tab piece is straight and press down as far as possible. And then I will press the stabilizer piece down. Now I add a bit more adhesive to this small tab on the inside of this tab, and then I wrap the big piece around and then the small piece and glue it shut. And since I want even more stability, I prepared another stabilizer piece to use it at the bottom of the tab. So I'm applying adhesive to the middle part on the outside and on the small tab on the inside. Then I can wrap it around the tab and adhere it to the panel. So now the tab can no longer shift and always moves straight up and down, and that will make our wings flap. So to adhere the bee, I used double-sided foam tape and placed it in the center between the 2 wings without touching it. That's important, otherwise the mechanism won't work. And now you can see our bumblebee is flying. And here you can see why I recommended to use acetate for the bare arms, because the pink is slightly showing. But you could also use a cardstock in the same color as your background. I think this would work pretty fine as well. So the last step would be to add the decorative tab. The die is included in the set. You just cut it from the color you want and adhere it to the tab. And adhere your panel to a card base. And that finishes the card. I really hope that this tutorial was helpful for you and that you give it a try. Thank you very much for watching and have a wonderful day. Bye bye.